the next day after they started firing, we moved out with our gun, and then we didn't lose any firepower because they told us that we with no need of it, the gun was safe, but it wasn't actually.
Well, I found it interesting that the memories they had were so clear about the events that they discussed, and these had to be over 50 years ago. And even though they couldn't remember maybe things that happened yesterday in some cases, they were very clear about things that happened during the war, their buddies that were with them, the pilots that flew planes they were on, and the people they met in the farmhouses or wherever. They couldn't necessarily remember all the names, but they seemed as though these memories were very close to their hearts.
How did you feel when you heard the war was over?
Great. I went to Switzerland.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was nice there. And I called home from there in a nice big hotel. It seemed like a miracle.
There's something slightly fraudulent about interviewing me as a veteran of World War II, because yes, I did serve, but I never heard a shot fired in anger, at least not at me. The good war, they called it, the good war. I mean, we thought of these people as evil. It was all sort of cut and dried. I mean, the Nazis had overrun Western Europe, and then we'd been attacked at Pearl Harbor, and it was a war that had to be won. There were very few moral issues about it, and all of us of my generation just couldn't wait to get in. We wanted to get in uniform just as quickly as possible, and the reason I didn't get into uniform right away was that I wasn't 18, so I couldn't serve yet. I was a 16-year-old high school senior at the time of Pearl Harbor. Started college, and then when I turned 18, I went into naval aviation training, such places as Chicago, North Carolina Pre-Flight in Chicago, and where I took primary training, and then Texas, where I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and then on to Jacksonville, where I learned how to fly the fighter, the Corsair, which included landings on the carrier, which scared the pants off me, but I survived, much to the surprise of my instructors. I had done quite well in what they called fighter operational, including gunnery and rocketing and strafing and that kind of thing. But when we got to the carrier landings, our first training for that was on a field near the main Jacksonville Naval Air Station that was marked out as a carrier deck and had the wires on it that we could catch and that kind of thing. And I did very badly on that. I almost hit the landing signaler officer, who was very irate about it. And when I got back to the base, I was called up to see the commanding officer of the training unit. And the landing signal officer was there in his office, still mad. And the officer in charge there said, Buell, do you really want to go on that carrier tomorrow? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, it's your life. So I was not really psychologically prepared for the occasion, and their training flights were flights of six. There were six of us, Corsairs, on the deck of the carrier, and I was the last one to take off. And I was so frightened that my knees were shaking so hard I couldn't hold the brakes very well, and the Corsair was gently moving forward, and I was terrified that I was going to chew up the tail of my buddy, which was right ahead of me, but fortunately he got off, he escaped. And so we went up to circle around, still hadn't made my first landing. We were circling around, and the plane ahead of me went into the barrier, missed the wires. Sometimes the tailhook would bounce. Went into the barrier, and his plane had to be disposed of, so we went up and circled around for something like 40 minutes, and I still hadn't made my first landing. I was looking down at the carrier, which looked just about 2 inches long, but my landings were okay, to my surprise. I only got one wave off, and that wasn't my fault. That was because they weren't cleared off ahead of me. But I've never heard a more welcome sound than they had a big loudspeaker system on the island in the carrier, and after my 14th landing, there was this wonderful noise, qualified, and that was the last time I ever got on a carrier. Well, it certainly refocused my life entirely in professional terms, because my first year in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I'd probably major in English and teach it like my father, whom I admired, and I thought, well, an English teacher, that's not so bad. I've been told that there are many veterans of my generation who won't talk about the war, and I certainly can understand that, because my war was an easy war. In fact, it was a lot of fun. I loved to fly. But the ones, particularly in the infantry, Marines, Army,